Good afternoon. You're here on Likeable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Ethan Allen. We're broadcasting from the ThinkTech studios in Pioneer Plaza, as we usually do, and we're glad you joined us on a Friday afternoon. Likeable Science is all about how science is a vital and interesting part of everyone's life, how it should not be relegated to the ivory towers, how it plays out every day for each of us. And to help me explore that today, I have Emily Gonzalez. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Good. Emily is a graduate student here at the School of Communications, Manoa. Just finished her master's thesis here.
I sure did. I sure did.
Super. Excellent.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That was on social capital via Facebook, a wellness connection. That was the title of it. And it's so we're going to be talking about a rather sort of a range of subjects, everything from starting from that and finding out what you were doing with that, but then moving into larger issues about science research, science communication, how these fields interact, and then looking even more broadly, I hope, at the end about how science policy is influenced, or policies in general are influenced by science, or not influenced, or wrongly influenced by the use or misuse of scientific research. But let's start a little bit of looking back at your work you've just finished here. How did you get involved in this project?
Well, I was introduced to the concept of social capital through one of our introductory courses in the program, the communications program, and it really resonated with me. It speaks to all of the resources that are available to us via our social networks, and it's a concept that's been around for some time prior to whenever you say social networks, now immediately people kind of turn to, Facebook and online social networks, but researchers have been studying social networks offline since before there was an online, right?
And so social capital is sort of the wealth, the resources that all your different social contacts, your friends, your family bring to your life. Exactly.
And it's so we're familiar with capital in the financial sense, and that we trade for other forms of capital. So we trade our financial capital, our money, for physical capital, raw materials, manufactured goods. We trade it for human capital, which is our skills, knowledge, abilities. Then there's also this social capital, which represents all of the resources that are embedded in our social networks. And unlike financial capital, you can grow it. It's sort of an additive. After every exchange, if the exchange goes well, you actually build your social capital, and you build trust, and you are authentic in your relationships. You're growing your social capital.
Sure. This is really critical. The book, The Blue Zones, talk about how social capital is so critical for those communities where people live a long time.
Exactly.
Those are communities that typically are very rich in social capital. The people who live a long time.
Exactly.
Typically, it's one of the sort of defining characteristics is these people typically are very well connected in their communities. They have lots of friends, lots of support.
Right, and I like the idea of kind of rethinking wealth from beyond just the money that you've got in your pocket to, your social relationships and the strength of those and the health of those relationships. And so as a concept, it really grabbed me. It was really interesting to me. And also, right before I started the program, my niece was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and I was interested in finding out whether the interactions we were having online about her journey, we started a Facebook group to sort of follow her journey, if that had any effect whatsoever on the health of my brother, my sister-in-law, her family, those connections and the social support we were able to provide online, if there was any connection to the health then of her caregivers and of my niece. And it turns out, based on the research that I had found, that yes, that kind of social support, when it arrives in the online form, is also very helpful. So I wanted to look specifically at social capital via Facebook and health and wellness. So looking at physical and mental health.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so in short, you found this actually does have a positive impact.
Yeah, I used a couple of measures, two different measures of social capital. One measure showed that there was this positive relationship between social capital as measured by what they call a resource generator, which is just kind of a checklist of, do you know somebody who can fix a car? Do you speak another language? Do you have access to somebody who knows about local government? Just this sort of range of resources that folks have identified as kind of being illustrative of your social capital. So by that measure, there's a positive relationship between mental health and social capital. By another measure that looks at bonding social capital, which are those close relationships. So are there people that you can talk to about, deeply personal issues, somebody who could loan you a large amount of money, those, that speaks to those tighter relationships. By that measure, physical and mental health were both positively related. So there's something there, that's kind of, it was exciting to me to see that,
and you can get a sense of that from Facebook. That is, you can look at people who are better or less well connected on Facebook and make inferences about their relative healthiness.
We can't necessarily tell the direction of the relationship, right? We're just testing for correlation, but it could be, that healthier people do have healthier social networks, but broader social networks and that kind of stuff, or more at ease with reaching out using a tool like Facebook. Or it could be that, having access to all of that stuff actually in turn makes a person healthier. And there have been arguments for both directions in the offline space and social support in the offline space. So it's kind of an exciting new territory. There's, at the end of the 20th century, there are researchers and futurists saying that the 21st century is going to be the, did I say the end of the 20th? The 21st. Anyhow, the end of the last century, researchers were saying there was going to be this explosion of social capital available to folks because of technologies like the internet, Facebook, social networking sites. So what are we going to do with that? Like what we've got some serious issues to address planetarily and, in communities. There might be tools such as Facebook might be very useful to help at least address some health concerns and that sort of thing.
Right. If we're all enriched, as it were, with greater options now to have more and more social capital, what are we going to do with all that wealth, as it were?
Exactly.
How can we put this to good use and not sort of splurge and spend it all?
Right. And I think the evidence that there's definitely this boom is showing through kind of, you hear about things like the sharing economy and you hear, even Facebook as a company, it is built on this idea of social capital. Like it's there, it's growing. I think the futurists were on the right track, and I'm excited to see how we'll invest it, how we can help people manage it, for their health, for all sorts of different reasons.
Right. Now we've changed the way we get information by you simply go out and Google things. But is this going to change the way we look at resources? When you need a particular service or help, you now just reach out to your community, your Facebook friends, and say, who knows a good massage therapist or whatever it may be that you need.
Right. And so it lowers the cost of the communication. It cuts the spatial and temporal barriers. If you need to get some information from the other side of the world, you can, ask a friend of a friend on Facebook and get an answer like, the speed of light.
The connections, when you get to second and third level connections, are suddenly vast. You have millions of people you're connected to.
And it's just kind of neat too that, there's some little tools out there right now that allow you to kind of visualize your Facebook network. And when you start to see, what that looks like on a map of, the planet, it's really kind of interesting how connected we are through these tools.
Right. Yeah. It is very, very interesting on LinkedIn and the different sets of them. How they can put you in touch with people, regardless of geography.
Right.
But that's intriguing. So, where is this? I guess, where is it taking us in terms of health? Is this like what Matthew Nagato talks about in Ola, Health is Everything, where the social capital becomes sort of a determinant of your health, where the richer you are in this, the more likely you are, at least, to enjoy good health, a good...
I think so, and I think, it's important to help people be aware of their perceptions of their own wealth. So if you think about marginalized communities as being having less financial capital available to them. Studies have also shown that they might have lower stores of financial capital, but there's a great deal of social capital available in some of these communities that have close families and those sorts of things. And you start to kind of reset the mindset. Now, I don't mean to say that there aren't sort of systemic inequities on the financial capital side that we should look at, but there's also this pool of wealth that we can help people understand how to manage, to improve their health, to improve all sorts of things. You know, the access to other resources, not just better health, is available through the social capital.
And it's very hard to, I guess, to quantify it in the same way we can quantify wealth, which is fairly easy.
Right.
But people, and I do a lot of my work out in Micronesia on these small islands. These communities are not rich in any sense, except they do have this tremendous connectivity. These people within these communities are very community-oriented, very devoted to each other in terms of supporting one another's work, deferring their own interests to those of the community. You know,
those sorts of values of trust and reciprocity that feed a really strong social capital
Exactly, and it gets to be really in ways that we have a hard time understanding coming from a mainland U.S. culture, which is very, very individualistic.
The law of scarcity, you know, that's our whole model of economics, you know, and how we think about wealth is from a scarcity model. But if we think about our social relationships, well, you know, you can invest in them on your own. You don't, it just as a matter of, you know, using communication is actually the currency of social capital, really.
Right, and so on a small island, the communication is largely face-to-face, but because of the small island, you're in touch with these people all the time, every day.
And now even in some more remote locations, the mobile penetration, so like people are using mobile devices, they're not accessing the internet through desktop or laptop computers, but mobile phones are getting out there, you know, they're exploding in some communities that don't have broadband technology or anything else, but they are getting on the internet through cell technology, and it's amazing that you could have access to all of this information and all of this social network in your pocket. So
it's going to be interesting, actually. That would be, I would think, an intriguing study for someone to look at and take people who have this one level of social capital in these small island communities and see how the introduction of mobile devices has changed that for them. Suddenly given access to this much broader community, but do they take advantage of it? Do they use it in the same way the rest of us do? You know?
All sorts of interesting questions.
Because the deep relationships that get formed in those communities, I think, are fundamentally lead to very different perceptions of social capital. Francis Hessel, an author who writes a lot about Micronesian culture, gives a great example of this in one of his books, Making Sense of Micronesia. He talks of a couple of families on one of these small islands where two teenage boys, families are longtime friends, two teenage boys, best friends. One accidentally kills the other in some sort of horseplay. How do the families resolve this? The family of the victim adopts the other one as their son, thereby bonding the families very tightly together. You know, a beautiful example of building social capital from this loss, basically. And something we'd have a hard time envisioning that as a solution in the mainland U.S.
Exactly, completely different paradigm for how to exist in space with one another. You know, and those are the kind of lessons also that are more available to us now that we can see what's going on around the world. You know, maybe we can start learning from some of these cultures about how to manage our social capital. There's, you know, there have been cultures that have been really well versed in doing it for generations and generations. Right here in Hawaii, you could find examples of that.
Absolutely. We're going to explore this further when we come back. Right now, we're going to take a brief break here. You're viewing Likeable Science. Emily Gonzalez is with me, Ethan Allen, your host of Likeable Science here on a Friday afternoon, and we'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Sachiko Slomov. I'm the floor manager of ThinkTech Hawaii here. You can join us on the air every weekday from 1 to 5 or off the air at ThinkTechHawaii.com. We stream all of our videos and all of our amazing shows at ThinkTechHawaii.com or on our Ustream channel. You can also check us out on Twitter at ThinkTechHI or Instagram at ThinkTechHI also. I'll be listening, and I hope to see you there. Thanks.
Aloha, I'm Hunter Hevlin, host of Sustainable Hawaii here at ThinkTech Hawaii. You can tune in every week on Thursday at 2 p.m. to see interviews with sustainability professionals from around the state and even further abroad, learning about activities with water management, food security, waste management, and a whole host of other fascinating opportunities to get engaged with making a greener island. So if you're interested in making the transition from consuming individuals to communities of producers, check us out every Thursday.
Good afternoon, and you're back here on Likeable Science. I'm your host, Ethan Allen, here on ThinkTech Hawaii. With me today in the ThinkTech studio is Emily Gonzalez, a graduate student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the School of Communications. We've been talking about social capital and her thesis on social capital, Facebook, how that the interesting interaction there. Mm-hmm. And I want to move a little bit beyond that now and
Sure.
look at some of the work you've also been involved in that has helped link science communication and science research, because this feeds into this idea of social capital. It's helping people connect, helping people build these kinds of connections among broader audiences and all.
Definitely.
So this Journalist at Sea program you've been involved in, give me a snapshot of that if you would, please.
Sure. So Journalist at Sea program is a program of COSEA Island Earth, which is the Center for Ocean Science Education Excellence. I believe you've had some other folks from our program here on the show.
Right.
And so the Journalist at Sea program seeks to build this bridge between the School of Communication at UH Manoa and the marine science community. So in the marine science community, obviously there's some of the most cutting edge science that's driving our understanding about climate change and all sorts of different things happening right here in Hawaii. And then we've got a School of Communications that's very broad. It's got several different tracks for our undergraduate students, ranging from journalism to public relations to media and production sort of things, and then more policy and kind of critical theory sort of stuff. So trying to build this bridge in order to, on the one hand, expose our communications undergraduate students to all of the opportunities that there are to tell the stories of marine science and tell the stories of the researchers and the really phenomenal findings that are coming out of the work here at UH Manoa. And then also to help out the marine science community with access to these students with these skill sets that, understand production and graphic design and that kind of thing. So there's been a huge movement in science communication. I say maybe the past 10 years, I guess. I think this program is probably born out of that, right? Trying to bring science to the general public.
Absolutely. There's been a traditional problem, and particularly as science has grown and gotten more and more specialized, that students in science spend more and more of their time talking to smaller and smaller communities of people who are sort of like-minded, people who are doing the same kind of research, and they become very good at communicating with those people, but at the same time, it is as if their communication skills sort of atrophy in other ways, and they become less and less effective communicators to the broad public. And we need to, in order to get support for science, we need to be effectively communicating with the broad public who supports science through taxes and
Exactly.
And so, yes, it's really critical.
Right. So if we can inspire the next generation of science journalists, or somebody who wants to get into PR for a conservation organization or something along those lines. We're just trying to sort of light these little fires and help these light bulbs go off for our undergraduate students and for the scientific community. Which, the social sciences are science. We've got some research to draw on as well.
Sure. But helping scientists learn to communicate better and helping non-scientists learn to understand science better, sort of both from both ends, right? Yeah.
You know, the facilities out at HIMB are world class, and it's just a phenomenal place. And our undergraduate students in communications would never have the opportunity to go out there and see what's going on under any other circumstances. Maybe they could sign up for a tour or something, but that's, you know, get real. That's not going to happen unless we say, come on out. You know, we want to introduce you to these folks, see what kind of science is going on, and to watch their eyes just sort of like, whoa, you know, open up, and to see them get inspired to, you know, pull out their cameras and start talking to people and think about ideas of how they could tell these stories. That's really exciting.
Yeah, it is, and it's a lot of it is not, it's not rocket science. I mean, some of this is just really basic stuff. Years ago, when I was involved in my graduate work, I would go out to social gatherings. People would, of course, say, what do you do? And I'd say, oh, well, I'm developing an operant conditioning paradigm to determine the scotopic and photopic spectral sensitivity of the African cichlid haplochromis burtoni. And by this point, most people were asleep, right? Or they turned away and wandered off. And I learned instead to say, when they say, what do you do? I'd say, I train fish.
Yep.
And
there you go.
It made all the difference in terms of spinning off conversations. Because everyone's can understand that simple statement, I train fish, and then we'll have questions about it. You know, why do you train fish? How do you train fish? What are you training your fish to do? You know, anything like this, rather than being completely lost by my previous long, convoluted, sort of pointless. But that was, you know, to another scientist, particularly a visual scientist, what I said before makes perfect sense and gives a much better sense about what I did.
And scientists have gotten really good at speaking to other scientists, right? I mean, the peer review process, the quality of work that's showing up in these journals is great. You know, I mean, it's the top tier stuff. The conferences that are coming out of this work, great stuff. Great minds getting together, thinking of the next round of questions. However, there is a whole other audience out there that becomes future scientists, becomes voters, becomes policymakers, that
teachers.
Exactly. We need to be having those conversations with them as well. And it's okay to have that, you know, just be yourself in that conversation. And I think sometimes scientists are under the false impression that they've got to, you know, be very formal and use a lot of jargon and all this sort of stuff in order to validate their work. But just like you said, you know, you trained fish. It's a great way to put it.
It's one's academic training pushes that onto you. As a student, you learn to talk in that way. You learn to write in that way because it's how you get status, how you get credential, how you impress people. You have actually learned what you need to learn.
Right, and it's important, and that's another language. And when you go to that culture, you can speak. Exactly, exactly, totally. That's exactly what we're trying to impart on science and the scientists, and what the whole science communications movement is trying to do is help the scientists learn visual communication skills and interpersonal communication skills, just to hone them. I mean, a lot of folks sort of understand these things innately, but because they're not haven't had as many opportunities to talk about their science outside of those environs, they get a little uncomfortable sometimes. They don't know how to do it, so we help them out.
I used to, when I was at the University of Washington, I worked at the Center for Nanotechnology. It would help the doctoral students in nanotech programs go and talk about their work in less structured, less formal environments. So we set up a program where I would give them 10 minutes to tell me what their graduate work was all about. And I said, you know, maximum of 3 slides, you know, very few figures or numbers on them, no jargon. And they all found this very challenging to do.
Takes some practice, it does. And then you add on to that, you know, most people fear public speaking. You know, I think it's supposed to be on the level of death. People fear death and public speaking about the same, you know.
Rather be dead.
So, you know, pushing some of these scientists out in front of groups or whatnot might be a little uncomfortable, but like anything else, it can be learned with practice. So if we give them opportunities to practice through this program, and then give, you know, our undergraduate students opportunities as well to learn the opportunities and to practice their skills in communications, and everybody gets better. The whole conversation
Moves
evolves
ahead.
upward.
Right, when non-scientists learn that they can actually talk to scientists, can understand what a scientist is saying,
Right.
with just perhaps more work on their part, but can get scientists to explain things in ways that make sense.
And that they're
Right.
I heard a statistic recently about I think it was only 1 in 4 people in the U.S. can name a living scientist,
Right.
and they're out there. You know, they're out there. So stand up and and be heard. You know, we need to know that you're there and that you're a scientist, so that people can, we can move that needle to where
Sure.
everybody can say they know a living scientist. It doesn't have to be Neil deGrasse Tyson. It doesn't
Right.
have to be, the other science guy, Bill Nye, right? They're out there, they're
Right.
everywhere, and they've got something to contribute to the conversation.
Absolutely, and yeah, as you say, that makes for a whole win-win conversation, and it's great when you take doing it through 2 sort of top-notch programs like the communications folks here and marine science people, where you've got very good focused efforts, and
Yeah.
that's a real nice example of a very specific way to as you say,
Yeah.
build bridges there.
We hope so. We hope so.
Excellent, and it's having good results.
Yeah, actually, one of our students just got back from 11 days out on the Moana research vessel. So they were looking at mercury and particulate matter, and using these big CTD collectors, and the science still after 2 years is above my head in many ways, but I find it all fascinating what I understand, and even what I don't understand I still think is cool. But so he got a berth on this research vessel, which would never have normally been available to a comm student, to go out there and share that experience from the perspective of a media studies student. So he's a photographer, videographer, and he blogged about it, and he is producing a video about it, and it's great for everybody to tell that story.
Those forms of media which a scientist may be less familiar with how to use, or how to use it effectively as a communications tool.
Exactly.
And how to sort of frame their science in that, with that vehicle, or move their science ahead with that vehicle,
Right.
which can be a really very powerful way to
engage people,
exactly,
right?
I was going to say sell their science to the public,
Exactly.
but engage the public
That too.
with what they do.
Yeah.
And plus, a lot of that stuff can really put a human face on science, which often science really lacks.
Exactly.
There's a very common perception that scientists are all older white guys, who live their lives out in these strange dark laboratories, and it's not true, right? They're
Right.
out there
The crew on that
ships.
boat
Right.
was diverse, and the science that they were that they were pursuing was diverse, and it is going to influence our continued understanding of climate change, and
and we're learning so much. I mean, I was just actually reading today on the NSF Science 360 news blog about one of the OPA here is actually warm-blooded, which no one had known. I mean,
Right.
here it's a fish that everyone's been sort of dealing with for years.
Exactly.
And no one knew it's apparently unique in that no other fish is actually consistently maintains its whole body temperature above that of the water.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
tuna sharks have been known to do that for little periods under special circumstances, when they dive in deep to hunt or whatever. But this fish has a unique physiological adaptation, so it can be a deep water predator and be effective at that.
Wow. And so, no, we can't predict how that little piece of information is going to weave its way into the story of everything that we know about the sea yet, right? Because it's this vast, deep, occupies 70% of the planet. There's still so much uncharted territory.
Absolutely.
But all those little puzzle pieces together, all important.
Absolutely. No, and that's the way science builds.
Exactly.
And that's where the communication piece ties in. People have to learn to tell their unique little stories well and engagingly, so that people understand. It may seem like a small thing. I demonstrated this one particular kind of fish actually has a color vision system somewhat like our own. it seems fairly trivial. I mean, what good does that do the world? You know? None at all.
Sometimes we don't know yet
Right,
you know, and it might be another 100 years
Right.
before that little piece of information sparks another idea.
Exactly, that could play out, and every little piece of it. And that's how science, of course, builds, is lots of little pieces come together and gradually reinforce one another and tie into larger and larger fabrics that begin to build hypotheses, larger theories, and ultimately science laws.
Right.
And we begin to get some deeper and more robust understanding of how nature actually works. Yeah, that's
the goal of the whole thing.
Excellent, excellent. That's critical. The communication does play a very critical role in that. Is helping people do that more effectively, more efficiently now.
Yeah, we hope so. And there's like I said, there's plenty of research and theory, and I don't know if there's law yet as it comes to sociological research, only because the variables of human behavior are really hard to pin down. But we do understand a lot about how to craft messages so they stick in people's heads, or how to, you know, weave a story together so that it means something or causes somebody to actually take some action, or that sort of thing. So
exactly. And we're going to talk more about that now in our final segment, but we're going to take a little break before then.
Excellent.
We're here on Likeable Science. Emily Gonzalez and myself, Ethan Allen, your host of Likeable Science. Glad you're with us. We'll be right back after this break.
Aloha, my name is Miley Scarpino, and I'm the host of the Empower Hour. If you're interested in health, nutrition, fitness, here on the island of Oahu, want to learn more about places to train at or different trainers available, then watch my show on Fridays at 3. We have a great time, and I hope that you'll come join us. Much aloha. Now go get swole.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island. I work in the ER there. But on Tuesday afternoons, I get to come and spend 45 minutes to an hour with Jay Fidel and the ThinkTech staff. They're terrific professionals. They help us to bring some of the leading cutting-edge topics here across our state to you. So you can join us at our... Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island and the ER physician. Every other Tuesday, I get to host a show here on the ThinkTech program about healthcare. We call it Healthcare in Hawaii. It's really enjoyable for me to bring other healthcare leaders from around the state to talk about our pressing issues. Hawaii has long been the health state, but we need to keep up the momentum, the inertia, and with your help and with your participation, we can come and share all of the big issues that are pressing day to day. Thanks for joining us every Tuesday, alternating weeks from 2 to 2:45.
And you're back here on Likeable Science. I'm your host, Ethan Allen. You've joined us here in the ThinkTech studios for another episode of Likeable Science on a Friday afternoon. With me today is Emily Gonzalez, a graduate student here at the University of Hawaii School of Communications. We were talking about her wonderful, interesting work with science, social capital, and communication. We talked some about a project she's been involved in with the School of Journalism and the marine science folks at UH. But now we want to step to sort of looking at the bigger picture here, how science communication gets used on a broader level. But first, actually, being an observant science sort, she noticed that somebody had tweeted us here. You can actually tweet in. And
that's great. Want to say hi to Alicia. Hi there. Thanks for checking in with us. And if you have any questions for us, I guess we can take them on the air.
There we go. Absolutely, absolutely. So once you get outside this sphere of sort of scientists talking to each other and the slightly larger sphere of people who are genuinely interested in science talking to scientists and scientists talking to people who are genuinely interested, we get into this larger sort of gray area when science gets sometimes used as a justification for policies. And people who aren't scientists sometimes lean into science and either cherry pick science or use science in odd ways. There are potential difficulties and challenges here, right?
Definitely. And I think that's another way that communications professionals can step in and help the scientific community. Because I know oftentimes folks that are involved in what we call maybe the hard sciences are a little less comfortable with wading into any territory that might be deemed controversial or political or that sort of thing. You know, it's really important that they maintain their objectivity and that sort of thing. and I can understand that, and I think that's completely valid. Where communications professionals can help is then to continue to up the signal to noise ratio of science, right? Like, so we just need to increase the visibility of science in general, so that people are more apt to be open to what science is teaching us, and less apt to kind of take the bait of the red herring of, say, the climate change debate. There's not really a debate in the scientific community, you know, and that journalists would continue to frame climate change as a debate, as an issue under debate. I find that a little bit irritating as a communications professional, and, you know, bordering on unethical as it comes to being a journalist. I'm not a journalist, but that I feel as if parroting that storyline is not helping us. You know, there's no debate in climate change.
Sure. No, so you're saying science communication communication specialists can help up the quality of the scientific discourse and the discourse about science in general and its role in society.
And gently hold accountable, you know, the Fifth Estate about there's no debate here, you know?
Exactly.
And help put those stories out there and it doesn't have to be in a confrontational manner, you know, you want people to be open to hearing what you have to say, so you can't, you don't want to attack anybody, but there's not really any debate as it comes to climate change anymore when 97% of the science.
Right. It's, you know, people talk about, well, this is only a theory, as if that were somehow denigrating the idea of, like, well, this is a random guess.
Right,
but,
right.
You know, it may be a theory, but, you know, gravity is only a theory too.
Exactly.
And the smart money doesn't bet that things, when you let go of them, go up, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's there's a broad misunderstanding, and to some extent that probably lies at the feet of the scientists themselves, but to partially it's on how science has been, as you say, framed or marketed to some extent, and that's a critical aspect, I think, that science has only relatively recently become aware of, is it goes beyond just having to sort of say, here is good knowledge I'm putting out here. It's sort of
contextualizing
exactly. Why should you care about this? How does this relate to your life? So.
And when you get into, you know, some of the minute details of coral genetics or something like that, that really, you know, those little details might not really make sense to the lay person, but if you frame it into the larger story of climate change and ocean acidification and that sort of thing, like, okay, now I get it.
Right.
Why we need to be worried about, you know, these events that happen in Kaneohe Bay and with the coral bleaching and that sort of thing. Like, there's a bigger story here.
Right. It may not seem important that one little species of some minute animal is having problems building their shells and the population is crashing, but yes, if that's really just the tip of the iceberg, that's the canary in the coal mine, then this becomes a much more interesting issue and much more important.
Right. And so, like, when you look at the nightly news, there may be the top 3 stories are a weather event, the drought, wildfires. Well, certainly, a scientist would not say, well, that's proof of climate change. There's no one singular thing that can prove this theory. However, a journalist might say, ask the question, well, it looks like these are things that have been predicted by the climate change models. Is that correct? And ask the question.
Exactly. And similarly with other controversial topics too.
Exactly.
Evolution being the classic example.
Right.
But many others too, and so that's great, because this is what needs to happen is we need to get past a lot of this sort of pointless rhetoric that people are just sort of posturing and taking their one stand or another for whatever ideological reason, and we need to have our policies informed sensibly by scientific evidence.
That would be ideal in our democratic process. And we should aspire to that.
Right. I mean, you see this, and encouragingly, it has happened in some limited areas, right? Schools, for instance, now a lot of schools are teaching second languages at much younger ages. It used to be second languages were only taught at high school level.
Right, when it's harder to sink in.
It's much harder right now. They're looking and saying, oh, of course, young children are much better at picking up languages, and it's much simpler to teach them a second language then, and that's when we should be introducing this. Indeed, bilingualism
Right.
particularly in multicultural communities like we have, is becoming a very popular thing because it's recognized that it does tremendous value.
And what a gift.
Right, and there's a tremendous body of evidence that says, yes, this is a very powerful tool to give to kids, and there's sort of a lot of upsides to it.
Will
virtually
build
no
their
downsides.
social capital because they can communicate with more cultures.
There we go.
If I might just spin it right back.
Exactly. No,
Why I love this concept.
Yeah, that's very good, and yeah, so that's nice, and at the same time, as you say, it helps hold people accountable for their words, and politicians are, in many cases, so fond at this stage or in this time, in this place, of having to position themselves for certain audiences to appeal and not offend certain audiences, that you will make at times just these outrageous statements.
Right, right.
There's been these recent claims that earth sciences are not real sciences. They aren't hard science, which of course is earth science community.
How much harder are you going to get?
Earth science community, of course, is rather up in arms about this.
Of course.
Yeah, and it denigrates their work. It tries to marginalize the importance of this stuff, all for sort of a political gain, because people don't want to upset, and in some cases offend, say, the oil companies who wish to continue to keep us running on a fossil fuel economy. You know, and that's they're in the business to make money, and one understands
and
it.
So, and you know, then you can meet the need of making money by saying, well, look at all of these alternatives, and look at all of the technology that we could just pivot here, and you know, it would actually make us money by investigating.
New solar power options, wave power, ocean undersea currents, tides, wind.
Exactly, it's all there. It's all there.
Lots of other options now. None of it is tried and true. You know, obviously it's going to take huge investments, but it just opens up new doors for scientists. And again, the communication piece plays a critical role here. How do you? The only way these are going to happen is if people understand them, if they're told stories about them in good, engaging ways.
And if they meet scientists and understand that these are not, you know, they're not shills for the tree-hugging hippies, right? You know, we're all reasonable human beings trying to make the best decisions on, you know, based on the facts as we see them, and facts is what we're really trying to get at.
Yeah, and it's very tricky because, of course, facts do change over time.
Exactly.
And so your fact today turns out to be tomorrow's falsehood.
Right.
But we all have to be as honest as we can about where the preponderance of evidence says, you know, what's going on. And to get back to your earlier comments, I think a lot of politicians now are, let us say, less than as honest about that when it comes to issues like climate change. There is a huge preponderance of evidence that says, yeah, climate is changing. Yes, humans have a lot to do with this. And yeah, there are probably things we can do that are going to impact it positively or negatively. And for states like North Carolina to pass laws that say you can't do anything other than linear projections of past climate in state policy is just sort of insanity.
There was something similar like that in Florida, right, where they weren't even allowed to mention climate change. And you know, here we've got the Department of Homeland Security and the Pentagon both are planning for, you know, all of the eventualities as we understand them now of climate change. So they get it.
Yeah, and you've got St. Augustine of Florida is experiencing the worst flooding they've had in their 450-year history.
But they can't talk about climate change in Florida.
The Everglades are alternate being flooded and dried out, and meanwhile overrun by invasive species. But yes, we can't, you know.
Right, and so, and you know, we get it, and we talk to a lot of other folks that get it. Now we've got to pivot and talk to everybody else. All of our friends of friends, we can use social media to do this, to really, I think I mentioned before, sort of change the signal to noise ratio. So we just got to get these messages out there. But, you know, we don't have to debate anyone. We just have to keep talking about it and just, you know, moving the dialogue upward and onward.
Exactly, and this is where to get back to your social capital comes in. That's how we sort of play with social capital, how we can use it to help improve everyone's life and enhance our whole community well-being. Excellent. Well, that's incredibly powerful then to realize the work that you were doing as your master's thesis is really, you know, addressing this really big picture, actually.
Well, I like to, my brain works in that way, you know, like I have to see all the ways things connect, and if I can't find it out immediately, then I will just, you know, keep trying until somehow it all starts to make sense.
Exactly. That's what it's all about here.
Yep.
Well, we're going to wrap it up here. It's been very nice talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like I've learned a whole bunch,
And me too.
I hope our audience has learned much too, and about how social media, social sciences, science communication all play in with scientific research. You've been here on Likeable Science. Emily Gonzalez, a graduate student at the School of Communications at UH, has been talking to me today. I'm Ethan Allen, your host here on Likeable Science. Hope to see you next week. Thanks very much.